If I would be able to do it.
Good morning.
Morning, Doug.
How are you?
Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Give me a couple minutes here.
Sure. Take.
Okay. All right. Gonna see if we can how we can do here. We've got two so far happy children in the right care, and the adults have had a difficult night with them. So let's see how this works. We're on 13B, towards the bottom, about 8 lines from the bottom. Is it 13B? Am I getting this right? Let's see. Maybe it's not 13B, 13A. Let's see. 13A, yes, 13A towards the bottom, about 8 lines from the bottom, Rabbi Avo. So we have been talking about the allowable ways to separate the different things that you're required to separate from your grain and so on Yom Tov. So, yes, okay. So we were talking about the Mishnah of that the Mishnah was talking about Tevel Tavel Shol Trumas Maser. When the Mishnah says discusses what you can do with this, you can use this on Yom Tov. It's talking about if you have a Levi that took the Maser early, okay, he took his tithe early while it was still we were talking about this fenugreek, it was still in its bundles, okay, so it hasn't yet been subject to truma, right? Because truma is only once it's been threshed, right, or gathered, or the processing has begun. That's when it becomes subject to truma. And the typical way it goes is first you take truma and then you take maser, right? First the portion goes to the kohen, and then from the rest you take a tenth for the Levi. So what happens if the Levi comes and takes it in advance, like before, he jumps the gun, as it were, then so this is what Rabbi Avo said about that. If the Levi comes and takes early, right, like we just described, Shemo Tovlo L'Trumas Maser. So since he did it wrong, but it still counts as maser, right? It still works, and so you can then take trumas maser from it, right? Then the Levi takes his 10% from that. So even though regular truma hasn't been activated yet because it hasn't been processed enough, since the Levi, since it is eligible for maser, and the Levi did take maser from it, so then he can take the truma from his maser, okay, and that is valid because since it's valid maser, you can take the trumas maser. You still can't take the regular truma from it. The original owner still has a problem, right? So not a problem, but he still has to process it first before it can be truma eligible. So Gemara says, "Kote shlamali." So why did the Mishnah say you have to first crush the fenugreek before taking out the trumas maser? Like if it works, it works. Like what do you have to process it first for? lemole kihechet diovuli hachi avinalach. The Levi can say, look, I've got this unprocessed fenugreek. This is what I got from my maser. Yes, I took it early, but whatever. This is how I got my maser. So I'm giving it to you the way I got it. Like I have no obligation. The farmer maybe had an obligation to process it and then give it to you in a more fine state, but I don't have that obligation. I'm giving you what a tenth of what I got. So why do we require him to process it first? Amarava, Knasa. Yeah, really, you're right. But because the Levi jumped the gun, and we want to, discourage that, so we're adding on, like, you just can't give your 10% to the coin. You have to first process it a little bit, so that will discourage him from jumping the gun because there's work in it for him. We have a similar Beitzah. Ben Levi Shenasan lo Shibon v'Masrasav, a Levi that got, you got Shibon, like ears of whatever, you got the grain for your maser. Also some goren, you have to process it and make it, process it so that it can go into the next phase, into the silo. But anavim also yayin, and if you're doing grapes, then you have to first make them into wine before you can give the portions to the kohen. Zaysim also some shaman, and olives, same thing. You have to make them into oil first. Trumas maser. Then you can give trumas maser. So this is in accordance with what we just said. The Levi has to first process it. Can't give it completely unprocessed as truma. Just as regular truma, you can't give from, you can only give it from the silo. In other words, after it's been processed and stored. Same thing. Same thing with the Levi's, the truma that he takes from his maser. Okay. So we said earlier in the Beitzah that you have to estimate how much seed there is and give trumas maser from that. So medida, you have to measure it. What's with this estimating? The 10% is 10%, right? What's the estimating? Hamani. So who's this according to? So there is a view that you can estimate. Abba Elazar ben Gimeli. There's this Abba Elazar who says, the Tanya, Abba Elazar ben Gimeli, when the Torah says to the Levi that you have to give a tenth of your maser to the Kohen, it says that's considered your truma. What does it mean considered? And it's in plural, your trumas. We're talking about two different kinds of truma. We're talking about both regular truma for the Kohen and the truma that the Levi gives to the Kohen. Just as regular truma, regular truma is not 10%. It's up to you. You can give, a smaller amount, a larger amount, right? It's left. I mean, the rabbis established a rule that, approximately 2%, some people can be more generous, some people can be less generous, but really the original rule from the Torah is there's no specific amount. So just as there's no specific amount, Truma Gedola regular Truma can be given by estimating because there's no specific amount. Uva Machshava, and also you don't have to physically separate it. You can think, like you can say to yourself, okay, the north 10% or 2% or whatever of this is Truma, without having to actually do anything. So so the same rule applies to Truma that the Levi gives. So even though there's a specific amount that you're supposed to give, but these rules apply that you can estimate it and also you can do it in your head. So Papa said, if that's the case, so that should be the case even if the Levi jumped the gun, right? Then he should be exempt from separating regular truma. But Reish Lakish says that still you have to do like besides the Trumas Maser, you also have to give the regular Truma because that hadn't been given yet since you jumped the gun. The Torah says, from all of your gifts, you should separate the Truma for God. So, in other words, that there's times that you have to give, you have to, it applies to both gifts, to the regular Truma and to the Trumas Maser, the Truma that the Levi gives. Hold on one sec. No, that stays down here. Thank you. Okay. Marisa, so why do you interpret it that way, that that the Levi has to separate Truma Gedola, that it's talking about Maser taken early and not from Maser taken from the unprocessed stuff? Because that's the process. Like that's what happens first, right? That it becomes this finished grain at this point where you have separated, where you've done this extra bit of processing. It's not awesome. We have a Mishnah. I'm a Kali so, and if you're peeling barley kernels, so you want to eat them, right? So you have to take off the shell. You can do it one kernel at a time. Peel a kernel, eat it. Peel a kernel, eat it. And you don't have to do maser first. But if you peeled it and put it in your hand, in other words, you peel a bunch, and think about eating pistachios, right? Most people eat pistachios. You open one shell, you eat it. You open one shell, you eat it. But what if you open a bunch and you collect them in a bowl or in your hand? So then you have to then you have to do maser before you eat them, okay? Because you're kind of, this is the processing that takes place, right? You're shelling them. And the same thing with Shabbos. In other words, if you take off the peel one at a time, that's not considered a Shabbos, a prohibited Shabbos operation. But if you do a bunch at a time, then that is considered a Shabbos violation. Any Sigmar says, is that right? V'harav miklafale devesu kase kase. Rav's wife used to peel them, a whole bunch of them at one time on Shabbos. So these wives of these sages used to do this mass peeling on Shabbos. So clearly it's not prohibited on Shabbos. Ella, if you're going to say that there's something that is similar to Maser and Shabbos, it's not about the peeling of the barley. It's about another thing that Mishnah says, which is hamolel. Somebody, if you're rubbing melilo shochitim, if you're rubbing the ears of wheat and you're left with kernels and chaff, so it still has to be winnowed, right? Then menapera al yad v'yocha. You can fan from hand to hand without a tool, right? And you can, so you know how this works, right? You rub off the peel, but you still have to, when they winnow wheat, the basic idea is you throw it in the air and let the wind blow away the chaff, and you eat the wheat, right? So if you kind of toss it from hand to hand without using a formal tool for it, then that you can do on Shabbos. This isn't like a true winnowing, but if you're kind of blowing them in your lap, that you can't do, right? You can't use I guess there was some kind of a bellows or something, or using your hands to fan, to create some wind, some air movement so that it blows the chaff away. In your lap, you can't do that. Only if you throw it from hand, literally in your hand. So that applies both to the making it subject to Maser, as well as to Shabbos. Okay. Maskifla Rav Abu Bar Mama asks for Reisha, but the beginning of the Mishnah, the Maser in Shabbos law. Okay, so you want to apply this, that Maser and Shabbos rules apply to the same thing. So you want to apply that to the same thing to the end, which is the rubbing of the wheat, but in other words, not to the barley. Is that the case? Umika mide to lean Shabbos lo havi gemar malacha, lo Maser havi gemar malacha. He's saying that there is a, if you're like, what's the definition here? If the definition is gemar malacha, in other words, you finished processing. So there's nothing to do with Shabbos or with Maser. We're talking about like, when did you finish the job, right? This is a strictly agricultural term, or an industrial term, right? What we're saying is this is when this phase of the operation is finished, right? And then we apply that to both Maser and Shabbos. But how could you change the definition of the industrial process based on whether you're talking about Shabbos or Maser? Maskifla Rav Sheshes Breder Avidis, or Rav Sheshes counters below. What did we do that? Rahal Garnon Maser, the Goren, the threshing house for Maser, we actually do that. We say that there's a different, depending on the rule, there's a different definition of the time. Okay, hold on. I'm going to take a short break here. Okay. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, we're gonna try and go a little further. Okay, so with the Goren, with the preparation of vegetables for Maser, Hakishun Adulin, cucumbers and squash, Misha Yafasku, when their blossoms wither, right? When the blossoms fall off, that's when the Maser obligation starts. The shore pasku, but if that's 1 second. Yeah, but if the blossoms haven't fallen off, then Misha Yami Narema, then it's considered complete when you pile them up, right? You harvest them and you pile them up. So even if the blossoms are still attached, it's not on the Gabi. So there you see that depending on the situation, there's two different definitions of processing, right? Of the finished process. Which is not navigated with selling. Similarly with onions, Mishiyami Narema, when do they become required? When they become chayv and maser? When when you pile them up. Regarding Shabbos, but regarding Shabbos, Ha'amada Sarema Pater, you piling up vegetables is not considered a malacha for Shabbos. It's not considered forbidden on Shabbos. So, here you see an example of something that is the definition of harvesting, or whatever term you apply to this. The definition changes based on what we're dealing with. Regarding Shabbos, the definition is one thing. Regarding Matzah, the definition is another thing. So what do you have to say? What is prohibited? What is prohibited on Shabbos? Sorry. Thank you. Note. What is prohibited on Shabbos? Melechos machshavos, right? Something that is, I don't know how to translate this exactly, but this is the kind of definition of what is not permitted on Shabbos. Creative labor. Okay, so even though Shabbos violation is not really dependent on the industrial term. Often that coincides with the industrial term coincides with melechos machshavos, with creative labor, but sometimes it doesn't. Right? Piling onions putting onions in the pile is not that's not creative at all. That's not that's not a Shabbos violation. So you do see that it's not strictly dependent on the industrial definition, and you can have different criteria for what is considered the process, the formal or standard process for Shabbos, and what is considered the process for Matzah. Okay, Ketzad Molel. So we said that you can rub the ears of wheat to rub off the chaff, to begin rubbing off the chaff on Shabbos, on Yom Tov. So how do you do that? Abayim Mishmei Rabbi Yosef Amar, Chada Chada. You have to do it like one between two fingers. Rav Avia Mishmei Rabbi Yosef Amar Chada Atarti, one against two fingers. Right? Rav Amar Kevan de Mishane, Afilu Chada Kubu Name. Since you're doing it in only one hand, right? We said that you have to do it with a shina, with a different process than usual, as a safeguard to not permit things that you shouldn't permit on Yom Tov. So since you're doing it in one hand, then it doesn't matter. You can do it one finger against one finger, one finger against two, or many fingers. It doesn't matter. Okay, so how do you do the winnowing? Right, the kind of fanning of them from hand to hand to get the chaff off. You only use the top part of your fingers from your knuckles upwards, but not the palm of your hand. They laughed at him in the West. Since you're doing it hand to hand as a different process than usual, it doesn't matter which part of your finger you use. Don't be so strict. You can only use one hand, but you can use, whatever technique works best. You don't have to restrict yourself to the technique. Since you're only using one hand, that is enough of a shinui to qualify. Okay. Next Mishnah. Beishamai Omrim Tavlin Neduchin B'Madoch Shalek. You can crush spices with a wooden pestle. Salt you can pound either in a clay mortar, or with a wooden spoon. Spices you can do any way you want, but salt has to be done with a wooden pestle. Okay, well, I mean, the problem here is obviously gliding, and we'll see what's the difference. Like the obvious difference, as we'll see in a minute, between salt and other spices is that one obvious difference is that salt doesn't lose its potency, right? You can crush salt or grind salt today, and next year it'll still be salty. Whereas if you take an aromatic herb or some kind of spice and you grind it today, it starts to lose its potency immediately. That's why people like to use fresh spices. All right, both opinions in the Mishnah. It's like you can't just do grind salt any way you want, right? There has to be some kind of distinction. My Tama, why? There's two opinions. Chanamar, one of them says, "Kol kederos kulan shvichos melach," because all you always cook with salt. Then kol kederos tzrichin, but you don't always use spice, right? Therefore, that's why you have to have a shino, because you're always you should have prepared it before Yom Tov. Okay, like you're going to cook on Yom Tov, you're going to need salt, right? Whereas you might decide to make something on Yom Tov that you didn't plan to, and like, oh, I really need some coriander in this, and you don't have any, right? But salt you should have prepared because you knew you were going to need salt. Or the other says, call a tablet in the because spices, the reason I don't want to do it before Yom Tov is because it won't be fresh, right? Whereas salt, salt doesn't lose its potency. So the salt, the other spices, there's a good reason that you didn't do it before Yom Tov. The salt, you have no excuse. You should have done it before Yom Tov. That's why we make you do it with a shino. What's the difference between these two reasonings? The other, what if you knew that you were going to make, what you're cooking for Yom Tov? You have a plan, right? And nonetheless, you didn't prepare the spices. So according to the one that says, oh, you couldn't have been expected to know in advance. Yeah, in this case, you should have known in advance, right? So we should make it more difficult for you by saying you have to grind with a shino, with a change in the way you do it. But according to the other one, it's like it doesn't matter if you knew what it was going to be. You still have the problem that the potency is lost if you do it in advance. Or b'morika, or it translates here as saffron, right? Saffron, currently, I don't know if this is the case, but saffron is unlike other spices in that it keeps its potency like salt. Okay, so if the reason is one of losing potency, then saffron wouldn't apply to saffron, right? Saffron would be like salt, but if it's because every dish needs salt, so you should have known you would have needed salt. But saffron, not the case. Maybe you didn't know you were going to make a dish that required saffron. Okay. Anything that is has to be crushed can be done in the usual way on Yom Tov, even salt. Didn't the Mishnah? Everybody in the Mishnah agreed that salt needs a shinoy. Right? You have to do it in a different way on Yom Tov. There's another Tana that has this opinion. The mayor says Beis Hillel did not. They all agreed that spices can be crushed in the regular way. And even salt. What they were arguing about is doing salt by itself. Salt, if you're doing it by itself, has to be done in a particular way with a earthen flask or a wooden mixing spoon. That's for roasting, but not for cooking. You can only, apparently for roasting, we felt you only needed a little bit of salt. But for cooking a pot of soup or whatever, you needed a larger amount. Beis Hillel says it doesn't matter how much you need. Really, you can do it with anything. Like you can't use anything. Like you can't use an electric mixer, right? Or an electric grinder. Not with anything, but lichol davar, not bichol davar, for anything, but not with anything, but for anything. In other words, for any amount, right? Even for soup, which requires a lot of salt. Okay. All right. I'm gonna have to stop here a little bit early. So we'll pick up here. Oh, sorry. One more line. Ravacha said to his son, when you crush salt, like put it on its side, put the mortar on the side and crush it. In other words, hold it in a specific way that makes a shino. Okay, so we're going to stop here for today. We'll stop a little early and pick it up here tomorrow.
Okay, Dub. Thank you. See
Thank
you.
you. All right. Sorry for the minor disruptions.
All right.